is the monthly meeting of the HB737 Health Commission Subcommittee on Communications. And we're here today with myself, Lorene Allen from Merrimack, New Hampshire, citizen advocate from Merrimack Citizens for Clean Water. And I will let everybody else quickly introduce themselves so people who are joining from the public know who's on this committee. Michael?
Hi, my name is Michael Strand, the citizen advocate for Bedford.
Yeah, Ron?
Ron Dunn. I'm the citizen advocate for Londonderry, New Hampshire.
Yeah, Nancy?
Good morning, everybody. Nancy Murphy, Merrimack Town Councilor.
Yes, and just for the benefit of the public, we should have representation from Litchfield. That's been a little difficult to attain. So if anybody is listening and knows someone from Litchfield who would like to join the Health Commission as a citizen representative or a town representative, that would be absolutely fabulous. We need your voice. So the purpose of today's meeting is to kind of wrap up our year. This subcommittee is on communications. And what we need to do here is kind of pull together a report for the full commission, which meets in early September. So those of you who have joined, be sure to watch for that on the public calendar. I believe it's the second Friday in September. And we have lots of information there from DES, DHHS, and legislators and citizen advocates and town representatives. So this is a very important commission. And as we work towards, what we're trying to do here, I think it's really important to consider that this was created 3 years ago or so, I believe. Nancy was the original drafter, sponsor, and worked very hard to get this commission passed and enacted. And it is really to pull together information and to look at not just the PFAS remediation and what's going on with St. Gobain and the state and our towns, but also it is called the Health Commission. So what gets lost in all of this, or not necessarily lost, but I think in the beginning, what you have to do from a local and your own home and a state perspective is stop exposure. So a lot of attention has gone to stopping exposure and getting people good, safe water sources. And now I think we have done enough on that area. We still have a ways to go, but I think we can kind of do a little more work now on health support and what people need. So I think what I'd like to do today is go around and have each person first give an update over. I'd like to know a couple of things. One, what are people hearing from members of the community? Because the state has announced their rebate program. The town of Merrimack is about to announce the Merrimack program. And there's been a lot of information coming out. On June 15th, we had the EPA state that their interim health advisories for PFOA and PFOS basically say that no amount is safe. And there's been a lot of people who are paying attention to this issue, and lots of questions have come out. Also, the final round of the state announcing that the agreement with St. Gobain for POETs and/or water connections to residents inside the consent decree, in addition to private wells that can apply for the rebate. That's been announced since we last met. And I'm sure as point people in your communities, all of you and myself included, are getting a lot of information from the public. So can we maybe start with Ron? And I'd like to know, what are you hearing from residents in Londonderry? What do they need? What are their questions? So we can kind of go bottom up. That's my intent, to then hone in on what we need to recommend.
First off, Amy, I want to thank you. I'm hearing a lot of good things, that you've helped a lot of people in town here. A lot of people are having trouble signing up as a vendor. So I really appreciate everything you've done. They said that you've been very, very helpful when they reached out to you to sign them up as a vendor. So really appreciate that. People in town are appreciating the rebate program. They're just having trouble filling out the paperwork. So a lot of people, I'm helping them. They're struggling through the process. I actually wrote an article for the Londonderry Times, put it in the paper to try to help people. So the issue is just getting the message out and helping people with the rebate right now here. Also, a lot of people haven't received a letter yet from St. Gobain that are in the consent decree. And I was wondering if there was any update on when everybody will receive a letter, because I know I personally haven't received a letter yet. And some people have, some people haven't. So it depends on what street you're on, I think. So I was wondering if there was any update on the timeline there. And is there any update on when I go to town hall, they don't seem to know about this Monadnock water situation with making a an area for the water to be picked up. So I'm trying to work with them still, and I'm just wondering if there's anything we might be able to do that I could do to help with that, because people are still waiting 4 to 5 weeks for water.
Is there anything there that anyone or Amy can respond to before we move on, or?
So I can say a couple things that I know. So with the timeline for the letters, is my understanding that the initial 350 residents on the initial list from April have all received their letter, and so that they are now working on the list of 600. So I know those are going out. I just don't know the exact timeline. I can talk to Andrew Fuller and have Mike give an update on that in the full commission meeting, which I think is in a couple of weeks, right? So I will make sure that Mike gives an update on that.
That would be fabulous. Thank you.
And then I will do the same for the bottled water. It's my understanding that St. Gobain is in the process of contracting with a second water company right now. I know their interim was to try and reach out to the towns to set up spots. I have heard that they reached out to Merrimack, so I know that happened, but I am not sure where they're at with Londonderry. So I will have Mike provide an update on the bottled water situation as well.
And Amy, if there's anything that I can do to help assist that, let me know.
Okay.
All right, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay.
That leads us, we'll just go right to Nancy, who can also update on the Merrimack Town Council's approach and what the response and thoughts were from the community and what you're hearing from residents at large. Nancy.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Amy. I think Ron says it all. Amy is our lifeline at DES. So she is Wonder Woman. So Amy, thank you for everything.
Thanks.
You
Yep.
rebate programs, contacts, and she's pleasant too. She's just always so nice. So thank you, Amy. Anyway,
You're
about Merrimack. Merrimack, I don't know. It sounds like we may be taking a little bit of a different approach than your community. We did discuss this at the town council meeting. And actually, I think I probably can say, I don't think there was any support for a town drop-off location. Not because the town doesn't want people to be able to have access to town water, but given that we understand that there's another contractor, I know I spoke with Andy, Jeff Martz, and he explained about the impending hopeful contract that's going to take care of people on the west side of the, on the west side of the river. And so that will hopefully unburden things. But the concern is that St. Gobain has an obligation to meet their contractual obligations. And this drop-off location, although it would make it easier for maybe a vendor, it doesn't make it easier for citizens. It actually, we've got elderly people that would then be expected to go pick up water, put it in their car as much as they could carry, I guess. And that doesn't seem to be reasonable with people that have already been victimized by this, that we're going to now make it easier for the polluter to meet a contractual obligation that they've not met all along here. There's been a lot of people that have not received water in a timely manner, which is supposed to be happening and has not been. And so, I think people at the town council were probably a little torn that, we want people to have accessible water, especially, we've heard from people that don't have it, and we want to be able to get it to them quickly, but we're not sure that that's the solution, that providing a town drop-off location, which would then further burden citizens to be responsible for that, it would be the solution. So there was, I think I could say, I don't think there was any support for a town drop-off location. I don't know what the thought is for other communities, but we just thought this was then further burdening citizens, and that I think it's hoped that the additional supplier will help. They'll help be able to resolve that, and that also that the responsible party will then be really held responsible to meet their obligations. So that's the Merrimack piece. So and then I just had a question, as a matter of fact, since I've got sort of the floor now, with Merrimack. I guess I was a little confused by our rebate program. I had thought that after our town council meeting that, that the application was going forward. And, and I asked our town manager at the last meeting, our last town council meeting, and he said, oh, that Amy was waiting for us to say whether we were going to go forward or not for approval. I thought the town council, I thought we had already met and had made that decision. So I wasn't sure why that didn't go forward. But anyway, I guess we had another meeting and confirmed, yes, we did indeed want to go forward for those citizens that, may, the reimbursement rate was slightly higher for poets. But so I guess that's where we're at. And I'm hopeful that, we will be able to have some people access public water lines, but given the timeframes and, obviously this money will run out at some point. There will still only be a limited number of people really that will be able to take advantage of that because we don't have the infrastructure, readily available for a lot of the places where we really need it to be. So, anyway.
And I'll add to since we'll stick with the Merrimack topic just for the record. What I'm hearing from residents is exactly what you're saying. There's confusion. I agree with what you say about the central water site. My thoughts on that, and I don't know if this can be considered or who's negotiating on our behalf, or it seems like it's just directly approach the towns and say, hey, do you have a place for us to drop off water? It doesn't sound like DES is involved in this, but maybe, right. Maybe what I thought is collectively we could make a request that what I really think we need is them to step up, get those water to those residents. That's their responsibility to supply that, and potentially put in a central water drop-off spot for any resident in town who is uncertain about their water. In Merrimack, we have public water customers who still we're in the process of lowering the amounts and blending in the water and remediating our wells, but we're not quite there yet. So there are many people who have bought bottled water for years because they don't want to drink the public water until they're assured that they're free of PFAS. So that's number one. As to the rebate program, just for your information, Amy, I'm hearing some general comments from people who, and I'm just giving them the link to your rebate page because it does have specific links within it. And the questions they're asking is, they seem to be a little confused about the water test requirements. Two couples felt that they had their original water test, but then they had to have it redone afterwards or to be reimbursed for the system that they had just put in earlier this year. They were to now have a post test, so they were unclear about the costs and who to use for that. So I referred them back to the state. I had another family reach out and they were asking about, well, what a lot of people are asking, not just them, about water connections. They want water connections. So there seems to be, on the topic of communication, whose job is this? Where are the water lines? We haven't been able to find that out, which kind of stunned me. I just had this idea that there was this master plan somewhere and everybody knew where the pipes were, but not so simple, which kind of stunned me. I'm like, how does the town or the water department? So I guess people are looking into that. So people who really want a permanent solution. So the resounding message I'm getting from the community is, while they're grateful for the rebate program, they're realizing that that's going to be in there forever in their homes. They're going to maintain it, and it is not being viewed as a permanent solution. And I agree with that. So the permanent solution is infrastructure. So I've been encouraging people to check back with the state, but the state, you don't have the authority to tell municipalities to lay down pipe. It's very complicated. So I think we need to figure out who can sit at a round table with the state and community representatives representing what we're hearing, so we can have some input, the municipalities and the town management all together to kind of put our heads together and look at, where are their grants, where are their solutions, and instead of reinventing the wheel and having all these separate conversations, right? Really being solution focused and looking, this doesn't happen in a week or a month or 6 months, I know that. And I think to be able to create, like when towns do those master plans, we need a master plan on this topic. I think this area, is immense. The contamination is immense in the groundwater. So people are frustrated. I think somebody was told by the water department, well, if you get some of your neighbors together and you all want to talk about bringing a line to your neighborhood, then maybe we can talk. you know, that resident was really frustrated, really angry, called me and gave me an earful. You know, I'm a social worker. I'm saying, okay, I'll listen to you. Let's see what we can do. So we need to do this, right? We need to talk about this, and we need to look at that federal infrastructure dollars that's specifically to PFAS remediation that's earmarked over the next 5 years, $10 billion. It's a lot of money, and that's what it's meant for. I haven't heard so far we're using state funds or state funding mechanisms that were funded partially by federal, you know, input, but we haven't, I don't think we've tapped into that federal program, have we, Amy? And that to me seems the answer.
Yes, so there's two pots of money right now from the federal government. And so one of them is the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, Emerging Contaminant Fund. So we have our first year of that funding now, and that has been allocated out.
Yes.
The second pot is the WIN Emerging Contaminant PFAS money. So that we had to, I think our letter went into the governor to express interest like maybe last week. And so that goes to the EPA. Then the EPA decides how much the state of New Hampshire is going to get. And then we have to then send in a work plan. So that money at this point, we don't have access to. So that will be sometime next year that we'll have the WIN money. And so we don't know how much we're going to get, but we are anticipating around 10 million a year for over 5 years.
Excellent.
So
Quick
So
question
this
on
is-
that point, Amy. And you know, I didn't do a deep dive on it, but from reading that emerging contaminants, you know, program, that funding, it seems as though it's sort of specified or targeted towards, you know, historically disadvantaged communities, or you know, there's an income related piece, and I think some concern from, you know, from Bedford, and you know, I think, you know, even the town side a little bit is there's, if that is the case, which, you know, I hope you can confirm, probably little to zero chance that Bedford would be eligible for that, even though, you know, simultaneously the challenge in Bedford is that we don't have municipal existing water. And so that's like the elephant in the room, is that there's no, you know, there's no money and no easy answer to, you know, to even doing small water line extensions where people are 100 feet or 50 feet, but they don't abut a water line. And so Gobain is not legally obligated to run an extension or hook them up, even if they want it, you know?
right. So in the terms of the disadvantage, you're right. It has a disadvantaged requirement attached to it. And so the states can come up with their own definition of what disadvantaged means. And so in the past, the state has always used a financial component to make that determination. We have recently revised our disadvantaged definition to include contamination. And so therefore it takes that financial element out of the
Okay.
mix. So it's going to be one or the other, or both.
Okay.
Really.
That's
So,
good. That's good to hear. I was going to say,
Yeah.
can we be, you know, geologically disadvantaged because of,
Yes. Mike had stated that earlier this year, and I was really
Yeah.
glad to hear you.
the
confirm
in
that.
Bedford that make this,
Yeah, because the phrase, Michael,
or,
is the
you know,
I think
or even the
undue burden. I think that's the phrase that's used, right? And we definitely qualify for this, you know, disproportionate
Okay.
burden and undue burden above and
Okay.
beyond. And think about that, you know, they were talking about how much Nancy was talking with Don Provencher, you know, last I knew, about how many dollars it took to, like, 1 million, wasn't it like 1.5 million for one
Mile.
1
piece
mile.
of pipe?
One
or something?
mile.
for
For
a mile, a half a
So-
mile. Yeah, it's crazy.
so-
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So think about that for any community, right? Regardless of median income, if somebody says, hey, you guys are going to pay for all this infrastructure because you have contaminated water, you know, people are going to go, what? Look at our tax bills. So I think, so what I'm hearing here is really positive, that if we make this recommendation, and I will in the report, that we create this committee or work group to be ready for the WIN money, to kind of have everybody together so we can start talking about that, know what we want to do and what it's going to take. The organization of this, right, is you have to be way ahead of it for budgets and funding and stuff. That way next year when that money comes in, it'll be great. And my understanding from a federal perspective is other states are looking at this program, and we are right on par. You know, year one, technically money could be allocated, but no one could really get together the definition and figure it out and apply for it and go through this process until just what we're doing. New Hampshire is right on it. And there's other states who aren't even as far along. So there was concern I had earlier this year about, year one is pretty much gone. Who's got that money? But as usual, there's more behind the scenes than we ever know. So are you guys in favor of this? Like we just kind of, create this, make a recommendation to have this subcommittee work group, partnering with the state and our town leaders and our water municipality to just start pulling information together. So we're ready to hit the ground next year when this comes in, which may not start next month, but does that make sense, Amy, to do something like that? So
quick point, Lorraine, but I think Nancy had her hand up first. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say, yes, I think that's a great idea, Lorraine. But as you mentioned, Amy and I were on a call with MBD. I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, a month ago. I can't remember, Amy. But part of it was regarding a number of things. When we're looking at the rebates, we were talking about what you mentioned was what we requested was that MBD provide a map of where the public water lines are, because we don't even know that. And I know they were going also to the National Regional Planning Committee for help with things. And so that I understand is in process, but that's certainly ground zero for knowing what which areas of the community are maybe the most impacted, or in terms of numbers, or in terms of PFAS levels that exceed MCL exceedances. So I think we need to know all that. Another point I just wanted to make is, Amy was talking about that wind money. Although that sounds like a lot, given what we know, it's $1 million a month for 1 mile. So I mean, how many miles do we have to cover? I'm just thinking in our community alone, even if all of that money was available to our single community, and we know how many other communities are impacted, that annual, would not probably even cover.
You might cover 15 homes.
Yeah.
This is the whole state, right?
That's the challenge. So, I mean, I'm not saying every penny we need, absolutely. But I'm just saying that the reality is the challenge is huge. And I agree, working with DES and the people that are liaison with their communities. I think that would be a great idea, Laureen, to put that together.
The optimist in me says we combine this money with the 10,000 per home that can go towards water hookups, to all these other things. And keep in mind, if the estimate of 10 million a year is our share of the federal, pot, that is for 5 years, and maybe for 4, because year one is this year, but then at the end they're going to have money left over. So maybe it will be 5 full years. So it's not a one shot, right, Amy? It's over
5 years.
Yes. So we can maybe lay out this, and you can't just say, go guys, put the pipes in the ground. They don't just all get in there and do that. So to kind of plan it in stages and stuff, I think it would be great I think the towns and municipalities are going to need some help, or at least a venue that everybody can talk together. And I think the citizen input is really important, because we've accrued a lot of knowledge, in this journey. So I'm going to make that as a recommendation then for our year-end report.
So I think one thing, that you're hitting on here, and both Nancy and Lauren, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. So I think the importance of having a unified front with this is more relevant than ever, because the way this is structured, and this is from, the top down, and I don't think it was anything deliberate or intentional in terms of DES's role in it, but, certainly, perhaps Gobain's, there's this, this individual, responsibility that they have to each contaminated well. And then also to the town, but unfortunately those parties were not involved in those direct negotiations of these agreements, right? So there's frustration there. And I think, especially if we're talking about big potential infrastructure projects, if we're able to, to find the money, I think that's what people want to hear. I think the challenge is people are angry, and what I'm hearing is, why is it that I have to do all this reaching out? I have to do all this legwork, when really these folks are the victims of, chemical pollution. So I think that's something I'm trying to work on a little bit more, is providing an extra arm in that outreach, obviously, from a communication standpoint, to try and triage some of those inquiries, whether it's a simple matter of, looping in Amy, which I apologize if you've gotten a million emails from me with people,
That's good.
or the town manager, Rick, who's really great and can easily see if they have, an abutting water line to hook up. But I think, the theme here, the pattern is that there wasn't any build out, there wasn't any structure that sort of, included a goal or allowed for, faster, prompter, and more adaptable outreach by the responsible parties to the people, and I think that's an area that, I feel like you're hitting on, Maureen, that, that we can work on. And to Nancy's point, you hit the nail on the head. My first move after wrapping my head around this was to get a map of existing water lines in Bedford and go, has anybody even asked, aside from a one-off request here and there, because what I'm hearing more and more is that, the stories of the street that has a water main on either end. But again, Gobain is not obligated to run that, and so they are arbitrarily deciding whether that person is eligible for a POT or a water hookup. And if you don't ask, you're getting a POT, right? And again, POT's a good solution. That's not the point. A whole house filtration system will fix the issue. But I think the sentiment I'm getting from the public is that it's more a matter of, on principle, why wasn't the furthest extent of a solution, the longest term solution, and yes, the most expensive solution for a responsible polluting party, not immediately gone after? And so that's where we are. But yeah, I mean, at this point, my advice, and I'm trying to urge the town side, and the town council to, to look at this, because we're still in early stages in terms of town PFAS subcommittee meetings. And so I hope we'll get there. But, I said, let's go through and identify, come up with a local definition for what, a reasonably close or reasonably accessible hookup is, right? Which means not abutting the property, but maybe, is it a street with 3 houses at MCL level? Within a half a mile, right? Let's come up with some parameters and then identify a quote, send it to engineering, which is very cheap to do, and at least have a known entity that we can bring to DS, that we can bring to Gobain and say, this is what we want, because there is community consensus around it. And then the ball's in their court, and they may say no, they may ignore it, but then they're going to be on record as having said no or ignoring it. My concern is what's going to happen, whether it's a year or 2 years from now with this new federal guidance, is you're going to have the vast majority of wells, above any new MCL, if and when New Hampshire mirrors the federal limit. And now we're in a whole different can of worms. You're going to have towns struggling to try and piece together infrastructure projects over time with no safety net. And that's why I'm really glad that we're having these conversations now. And, back to your point, Lorene, I think having, more of a unified conversation around this with the state, with outreach to try and get this federal money is going to be really, really critical. Otherwise, we're going to wake up in a year or two and you think people are frustrated now, or we think we're in a pickle now. It's going to be, exponentially, magnified, I think, in the future. So
it's complicated. Thank you for using the word triage. When you said that word in the beginning, it just got me. And then I thought to myself, wow, that is so validating. That is what we're doing. That's what I've been doing for years, triage. So that's really important to just sit and think about that word, because, we all have jobs and lives, and this response to people who are not only frustrated, but have a lot of emotion. Whereas this is the third deal that Saint-Gobain has made, the first deal with the state over establishing the boundaries of the GMZ, the inner boundary and outer boundary and all that, which everyone agrees is a bad deal. The MVD, deal that they really strong-armed and bullied and coerced. And, there's these 70-something water commissioners who'd been there forever at that time, who were really left on their own. No fault of DES, but the state didn't back them up. New York, you get this little bitty town of Hoosick Falls, Whoville, right? And the Attorney General, which is way down in the snazzy part of New York, backed them up and had their backs. The state quickly determined hazardous substance designation, which, by the way, is being announced today by the EPA. Hazardous substance for PFOA and PFOS. I have some press releases out with quotes from myself and others in the National PFAS Contamination. That is going to be huge for New Hampshire and our communities. But the issue is in these agreements, what you're saying, Michael, is what we've been hearing from people from the start. No one asked us, you know. We have a phrase in the national contamination that we use towards the EPA from years, saying nothing about us without us. You know, that is kind of our mantra there. And we always remind them, you know, we need a seat at the table because we are the impacted people. And this isn't just a little thing that somebody says, oh, hey, your roof warranty, you know, was bad, so we're going to stand up for you. Here you go.
Yeah.
We fixed it. This is infrastructure. This is permanent solutions in water, you know, that we have to think beyond, you know, poets. And you're right, they got off really cheap with this. I was really, really angry. You know, I compare it to the Amherst agreement with TCI back in early 2017. Over 100 homes were connected to Pennachuck water. They had poets as an interim measure, and everybody had blood test access. Boom.
And
That's
look,
what you would expect.
and Lori, and the other side to this, which is really frustrating, and you know, and it almost puts people in an impossible situation where they're having to even attempt to negotiate or, you know, communicate. Often there's no response from Gobain besides a black hole voicemail, you know, and we are really grateful for Amy and Andy and DES for facilitating communications when we need it. But it's like, you know, every poet that goes in, they're then legally off the hook. And
Right.
so the other thing here, which makes this an impossible situation for homeowners and you know, folks with contaminated wells, is that you can't continue to drink and use this contaminated water. You need an immediate solution, and a poet is an immediate solution. Even water lines take 2 years. You know, even if you are eligible for, you know, hookup is a little faster, obviously. But so there's been the slow, you know, speed to act on Gobain's part. People in bottled water for 2 years haven't even gotten a notice on a poet yet. But then the problem is, once you accept that poet, which you need for the health of yourself and your family, you know, now you're one less resident on that street that would justify running a water
Yes.
line if it were a, you know, reasonably accessible distance. And
That-
so
that
it's
10,000
almost built to
is not going to be
protect.
used very much. You're right. It's
just built to protect. You know, it's almost a self-insulator for Gobain, because you need the short-term solution, but then you give up your right to the long-term solution. And that's an impossible you know, setup, unfortunately. So to echo what you said, you know, I wasn't aware of the Amherst situation. I really wish that you know, and maybe if, you know, this money for potential infrastructure is federal, then, you know, obviously it wouldn't be limiting, you know, people have poets, but you know, it really should be both. I mean, you also have concern from people that even if they're on Pennachuck or Manchester water, yeah, I know DS, I'm sure, samples that water regularly, but there are valid questions given the ubiquity of PFAS contamination from multiple sources, including possible rainwater and air, that, you know, how do we know that the, you know, the levels in, you know, even municipal water are not higher than what future potential MCLs could be, you know? So then you need a poet and city water to get it down to a.
Yeah, they're going to be lining up for some money when we get some federal, you know, regulations, because they're going to be lower than New Hampshire's. And now we're going to see Pennachuck water needing remediation. And you're right, that 10 million a year and whatever else. I mean, I think we can count on our federal delegation to make the case and bring some money in for what we need. But polluter accountability is what ultimately I'm hearing you say is not there. And for whatever reason, you know, whatever the state proposed is to TCI. TCI was a true good neighbor and did the right thing. St. Gobain is very powerful, and the AG caves to them, and they get a sweet deal. And yeah, the costs have gone up. If they didn't drag this out, though, you know, if in 2019 they said, oh, let's do the right thing, they would have saved a lot of money, you know.
Well, and to your point, you know, we're going to end up needing likely a big federal solution, you know, and maybe there's hope there, you know, in addition to, you know, the one thing that was great that DS did in these negotiations was obligate Gobain to, you know, this groundwater management zone, which means that they are going to be married to this issue long term, and there hopefully will be some long-term accountability. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, Nancy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, what we can't forget in all of this is all that federal money, and it's not St. Gobain paying for this. Still, you know, this is
accountability.
We are paying for much of this ourselves, and I think the frustration when you asked about what we're hearing from the community over and over again is the concern about why are decisions continually being made about us again, without us, with no impact, with no voice, and, no citizens at the table, or sometimes not even towns involved. That there are these negotiated consent agreements and those kinds of things that seem always to be made to the benefit of the polluter, and not the citizens. I mean, we're bearing the costs, the financial costs of trying to filter water. We're bearing the health costs of some known, some unknown, and it seems like the burden continues to fall, whether it's on getting that water jug delivered to your town and go and get it yourself, all the way to the money. And I think agree, I've heard a lot of concern about why DES agreed to that a poet was a permanent solution, and that Saint-Gobain was not required to put in water lines in areas, especially where we know there are some lines at the end of a street, and we have a whole street of impacted homeowners. So there are, I feel bad because I think Amy feels a lot of these calls. I mean, she hears it from us, from the town, she hears from citizens, and I think that's why it's so important that somebody like Amy be on the other end of that call, because unfortunately, Amy, you probably need a lot of long weekends, but there's just, we've got so many impacted communities with longstanding issues that seem to be continually resurfacing. Like, what was this? What's the new agreement that was made, I would love to see that one. I know there was a more recent agreement, that one about the poets and stuff. I don't have that myself yet. I don't know if that's public, but that's the kind of stuff. It's the decisions are made and then we pay. That's really,
I keep in mind, this went on even from April to this summer with the final this piece here. So I would believe that, I think DES was really going to bat for us behind the scenes in negotiation, but ultimately it's what Saint-Gobain is willing to do and what the Attorney General agrees. This is what it is. Looking back, I almost wish that, I don't know if this is even possible, that we had this citizen representative attorney who said, hey, I'm here to represent the citizens. I'm sitting down with you guys and they representing us, because the AG is almost like mediating, and the business is getting their needs and all their arguments over how much they've paid and all that. Oh, I'm so sorry, your billions of dollars of profit might be a few billion less, so it's frustrating.
Well, and Laureen, you're, really good point there is there's another layer to this in terms of town attorneys, and and they're sort of walking this line of protecting the town, because
Right.
you have some towns that are also named responsible parties for fire stations and things like that are pending, and so I 100% would vouch for that. I don't know if that's on the table, but to have a citizens as part of this commission, citizens appointed attorney, because I did some outreach just to get a secondary consult to verify what I'm hearing, about the legality of towns ever bringing suit on behalf of residents. That it's very difficult to do. You really can't do it unless you're impacting like town property. And I thought that was so ironic and fascinating that even though a town is quite literally composed of the residents and taxpayers in that town, a town cannot actually do anything on behalf of its residents, which is nuts. But a couple quick things that before I forget, in terms of a pickup site for water for Bedford, I think that would be a positive thing. On principle, sure, frustrating, but I think there'd be plenty of volunteers who'd be willing to help. Folks who were either seniors or had physical barriers to be able, being able to get that water. And I think as a plan B, as a backup to have it there, would be a positive for Bedford residents. I also think, my initial response, which, was largely rhetorical, but also not, hearing all the complaints about water delivery delays, people running out or getting down to one or, 2 5-gallon jugs. And, now they're having to take time out of their day. It's costing them time and opportunity cost and money to call to get the water. So my advice to the town, again, sort of tongue in cheek, was why don't you pass an unenforceable town ordinance that, fines any water, delivery provider who is delayed, $2,000, a pop, per delay. And, again, it wouldn't be legally enforceable, but it would send a message. So I think the pickup site, again, in lieu of, additional suppliers, which Amy mentioned, Gobain is working towards, would absolutely be a, positive to guarantee that nobody is without it. Because there are plenty of people in Bedford who, would have no problem, helping residents and make sure that they're not out. The other thing I really want to share that's important, and then I can hush for most of the remainder of this meeting. So in Bedford, we had the last town council meeting. The town council did provide a forum for citizens affected by PFAS to speak, which was really productive. And then we also had our first citizens action meeting, the second of which will follow this month. And I am very concerned after hearing from a couple of individuals who are exactly in the area that is most proximate to Merrimack. I met with a woman who is now on her second round of breast cancer treatment. And her doctor, her primary care provider, was shocked that she had beaten it and it came back. And, of course, I'm not going to jump the gun and suggest that, there's a connection to PFAS, but we've seen what's happened in Merrimack. And so my advice to her and my continued advice, to anybody experiencing health issues will be, even if it's to eliminate PFAS as the cause, go to your PCP and get a blood test. And that will also hopefully help on the health side of this, which is not our subcommittee, but, to try and continue to help educate, physicians and, healthcare professionals in terms of the need to test for this. So, that's I think my biggest concern right now is hearing a couple of, those stories, and then back to Laureen's point, this is also structured where it's very difficult, even if somebody, God forbid, is in the worst case scenario here, where there've been, identifiable, connected, provable health impacts, and would be eligible for punitive damages or to bring suit against the, the responsible polluter. They're a 300-year multinational company. I mean, it's hard enough even for a state to bring suit should they ever want to do that or decide that the agreements that were made, were in bad faith or not acceptable. And, obviously the state, has relinquished their right to do that through those agreements, but towns and people haven't. But it's, it's $1 million lawsuit if you want to do that. And so it's not going to happen. And they know that. And so I think we need to get together and I'd love to see Londonderry and, and Bedford and Merrimack and Amherst now potentially, Litchfield working together. I know there's been some discussion, some outreach from our town manager, and it wasn't really met with a ton of interest, but we really are going to have to be a unified front on this, or we're not going to get the results that we want. That's it.
So there's a couple things there that I'm trying to see what I can put into a report or recommendations or what we can do as an aside. One of the things you said is you're in favor of the pickup site, but as a backup. And that is great. Maybe we can draft a letter and we can all kind of sign it, or the Health Commission can sign it or something, and we can just send that message to St. Gobain and just say, hey, there's mixed feelings in towns, whether we want to help you or not, but this is a good idea as a backup while you continue to work with the vendors to directly deliver to communities. Does that make sense to try to come up with?
I think that's a great idea. And I can ping Rick or see, I don't think we've heard anything from Gobain yet, Amy, which you can probably verify, but would it be helpful, for me to reach out or for somebody to try and expedite that and say yes?
Sounds like I'm thinking about all the federal advocacy I'm doing. Sounds like a sign-on letter, draft a letter, get the towns to sign on, get the citizen groups to sign on, and I'm sure the state would have no problem with it. You may not be able to sign on, but but what we're basically collectively saying, and we can ask all the councils, is we're hearing that we really would like to continue to work towards a second vendor and home delivery. Winter is coming, for goodness sakes, right? But we feel that perhaps the towns or somebody could have a site as a backup, for people to go and pick up water so they don't run out. Instead of the way it was presented was, hey, we'd like to, put all your water in the middle of your town and then wash our hands of it, and you guys can manage it. And and who's going to work it? The town's got to put an employee there, and think about that. They have to come up with storage and solve that problem. So our town council was very, I would go so far, I was at that meeting to say they were polite and appropriate, but I dare say they were triggered by that ask because of all the victimization and all the BS we've been through with permitting and the RTO bypass. Oh, sorry, the blatant lie to media saying that, oh, it was in the permit that we submitted to the town in Merrimack. the audacity. I saw those initial permits and the stuff that was drawn on a napkin first time practically. It was appalling. It was so negligent on their part, and they know it, to say that it was in the permit and we just didn't see it, the arrogance. So that's number one. So maybe
it goes back, Laureen, to, you know, this thing we keep touching on, which is, we did it, you have to go find the answers.
that's right. That's right. And we can't be bothered. And go ahead, Nancy, on that topic.
I was just going to say, I mean, even as a backup, what you just mentioned is an issue, and I imagine it would be an issue for all of the towns when the reality comes down. Where is the space going to come? Is Saint-Gobain going to pay for a rental space for communities to house there? Are they willing to do that? Are they willing to, you know, does that mean the water delivery person would come and would bring all of the water into the thing, or is there some expectation that there would be somebody there to help them? What's the accessibility? Does a town then have to stay open? You know, if you know what the burden becomes then, somebody decides at 9 o'clock at night that they get as a phone call that somebody's
hours,
whatever, needs water. Then is it up to the town then to pay staff to go open whatever?
See?
And that's the
like
issue.
a town councilor.
The displacement of burden again,
Yes,
and that's I think something that really
the logistics. You don't need the logistics. What you're saying is a town councilor.
Right, and then even making such a recommendation.
All right.
I mean, the town we've had no say in anything all along. So what would lead us to believe that anything we would say, I mean, we as a community, I mean, would then be really an expectation of the responsible party?
So,
I mean, I think it'd be good input.
Letter, so that negates a sign-on letter, because a sign-on letter would be specific. We can't lay out all these questions. So maybe we need to pivot to, do we request a Zoom meeting with Saint-Gobain with all the town managers, any town councilor who wants to join, and citizen advocates and the state presence, of course, to discuss this request and talk about the concerns, and the towns collectively can say place, space, staffing, accessibility, all of this, and maybe we can solve it if they meet or criteria, and we send the message that it is a backup in addition to the home deliveries. So can we request that meeting with them? Amy, any thoughts on who would make that request, or would we make that request? I have no problem making that request, actually.
I would think that would be you on your end making that request, and not the DES.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Nancy and I can work on that request to Saint-Gobain for a meeting, and I can reach out to them and just say, this has come to my attention. I'm hearing from different communities who've been approached, and I would suggest if they would like to set up, a virtual meeting with each town council, town management and citizen advocates to discuss, so they can hear what our thoughts are, and maybe there's a solution, maybe there isn't, but we can strongly send that message that it's a backup. And Nancy, clearly you will raise the issue of place, space, accessibility, staffing, and all these realities, and that's on record. And I think, maybe they can address it and maybe they can't, but that would be okay. I will do that. I will take pleasure in that one. It's better than writing a letter too, because my keyboarding skills are just not quick. So, okay, I'll reach out. And then the other piece that you raised, Michael, is something that Nancy and I have worked on from year one. When you start to engage with communities and where you are in your journey, if you need to reach out and call us, please do that, because you start hearing some really heartbreaking stories from people. Right? And what in your life prepared you for that? As a clinical therapist for many years, I've sat many nights and just said, wow, this isn't in my office. This is in my life, in my community. And I hear what you're saying. I've heard many people talk about cancers, a person who had kidney cancer twice, cancers that their oncologists are saying, what? We did a good job. We got this. We gave you the proper treatment. Why has it reemerged? And I'm hearing this from people over reproductive health related cancers and kidney, of course, elimination parts of the body and reproductive systems in particular. It's really problematic. So we need that guidance. And the NASEM guidance, Michael, are you familiar with that?
A little bit, but not in depth.
Okay, the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine, NASEM. I can send you the link. So they were commissioned a couple years ago to go out and try to solve this problem for the CDC and to make recommendations on what to do about all these communities. They were also limited in scope. They could only look at 7 legacy PFAS. So what we know where full exposure is, which we do know, thanks to the great testing from DES, but it's a double-edged sword because it isn't really addressed, but it lays the groundwork. And what they say is they strongly recommend, and they go so far as to say, communities with exposure should have blood tests, period, end of conversation. We've been saying that since 2016. It was very validating. And you should have guidance to the physicians, which says under 2 parts in your blood, sum of 7 PFAS, you know, should be okay, but we'll watch you and monitor you. 2 to 20 parts. These are the health conditions that Health Science to Humans strongly is of concern. You will be monitored vigilantly for these conditions. Over 20 parts, you know, clearly not great, right? Breast cancer was mentioned in this report, and breast cancer it's been really wiggly. Anything to do with breast health and memory as an endpoint is a strong science finding, but it hasn't really been acknowledged from the start. And it's starting to come into the dialogue, which is both great and staggering, right? In scope, we know we have very high rates in this area. So what I do is I pass that NASEM guidance on to people because they can give that to physicians, and it's more powerful because the NASEM, I guess, to physicians is they know who that is. I didn't know who they were till a couple of years ago, and I was a community liaison on that project, so I was pretty impressed. But healthcare people, they look to them with respect. The CDC has stated in ATSDR, they said in June, within 6 months, they will incorporate the NASEM guidance into their physician advisories and redo again, you know, their advisory fact sheets. Senator Shaheen's office has put a bill out, which was passed. There's money there now for physician education. So, you know, under the communication category, I think, you know, we'll have to pull that together with the DHHS. You know, how do we message this? This has always been a problem. And how
that's
do
really
we
helpful, Laureen. I'll take a look at that. But you know, my kind of layman's opinion immediately to the woman I met was, you know, go get tested because clearly everybody has this stuff in our blood, right? I don't think you can find an American blood sample without some trace level of PFAS. Let's say you go back to what is it, the Korean soldiers in the Korean War, something crazy.
Well, if your blood result says non-detect, you need to look at the parameters of your testing because there were a few years ago a lab that people could access, and the parameters we found were too high. At this point, I believe it's been corrected. And if you hear anything about this Eurofins finger prick send-in blood test, which people are starting to hear, please be aware if people ask you about it, that will measure blood, not serum. So the NHANES and all the comparison data out there is based on serum. So they do have a conversion column where they convert your blood results to serum results. And I don't know about that. I think the serum test is the way to go. Your physician can order it and it can be done at this point. And, you know, thanks to Nancy, who did another bill a few years ago that really gave insurers a mandate that they will cover this in New Hampshire. That does not really mandate the CMS, the Medicare and Medicaid, and potentially not the federal health plans, but that is in the works. I'm doing some work on that. So we're getting there.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, and my response was simply that a physician with guidance is going to know whether you have a relatively, dare I say, normal level, which is almost painful to say that we're talking about normal levels versus such a high level that could be clearly, reflective of something else going on, so.
Good. Yes.
I was just going to say, to your point about the blood tests, certainly we need to work on the federal coverage for Medicare and Medicaid. And the other thing is, I know when we passed that bill, I mean, I couldn't even take advantage of that, my own bill, because my husband works in a company from Massachusetts. That's the main office is in Pennsylvania. So because it's a Pennsylvania company, even though we live in New Hampshire and that's my insurer, I don't have access to that myself. But it helps a lot of people here, and that's a good thing. But I agree, Lori, we have to work on that. The other thing I was just going to mention is that and I probably said it in the past, that the SB 85 Commission, the Environmentally Triggered Chronic Disease, and HB 737 have many parallel objectives, and a lot of the work is very similar. And on that commission, I sit on that one as well. I'm the vice. What we've been pushing for the last couple of years, both of these bills were from 2019, and they're like 5-year bills. So I think we've got to 2024, and I certainly think that we'll have to go beyond that. But both of these bills show us, the need for data collection, health studies of, I just look at Merrimack alone, you get almost 28,000 people here. Where if ever there is a ready pool of, contaminated residents, this was certainly it. And we've been asking for that without much success thus far, as well as blood testing and those other things. But one of the things we're working on is SB 85, and will be one of our recommendations in our report, similar to the 737 one, is that the health impacts, the endpoints known to be associated with PFAS exposure, be the data collection points for our health providers here in New Hampshire. And in April, I think it was April, along with Peyton DeTulio, who's a nurse practitioner from like Pennacook area. She sits on the Northern New England Nurse Practitioners Association, and we did a presentation to health providers from Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. I think that was predominantly those groups, about PFAS, an introductory one, and I did a presentation about the impact on residents. It was very well received, and actually we are going to be, I think, the lunchtime conference again this April, because there was such an interest in it, which is a great thing. And all of the points, it was in concert. John from DES did the primer on what what PFAS is, and it was phenomenal. He's a great presenter and always does such a great job. But it was very well received, and I think health providers want to know. I just don't think that they don't know that they need to know. And that, Laureen and I, we've been talking about this since 2018 at the very least, of how we know more than our health providers do in many situations, and that certainly shouldn't be the case. So the interest is there. I think our health providers will buy in. I think they're starting to show up. DHHS is on this group with us, and we are all working through that SB 85 commission. That's a big focus, is the health provider education, and and the blood testing and those kinds of things for our communities.
It's a parallel to this idea of a work group
Yes.
to be ready for the money.
Yeah.
We're talking about,
Exactly.
we have it's 2 commissions, so we have to almost get a little more honed in on being ready for the new CDC guidance as the NESM gets incorporated, how to really be sure that residents are getting information, and physicians, etc.
It was
Pulling it all
concern
together.
from DHHS about creating a registry, because we thought that would be important. They didn't like the idea of the word registry or the whatever. And, we said it's really not what we call it. We don't care. We just want somebody to be collecting this data because it exists, and to pretend it doesn't deprives a lot of us.
Yeah.
And one more thing is that the other thing is when we pushed in the 737 commission for that cancer incidents report to come out back on December 10th. One of the things that I know I questioned myself when I looked at the numbers and the standard incident report, SIR was whatever, 1.01 or whatever. And that was the kidney and renal pelvis cancer. So that rose to the top. And I looked on that the report, and there were 4 other cancers that were just slightly below. And I asked DHHS, and I said, well, okay, certainly, we need to be concerned about the kidney, but what about those other 4? I mean, these are, and how was that number chosen? And, DHHS explained that was just where they decided to make the call. Well, if they had made it just a little bit lower, we'd be looking at maybe 5 cancers.
Yeah,
So,
which is
you know,
more accurate. Continue to encourage people, folks, to call the cancer response team.
yes, yeah,
That number, I gave it out to several people this week because we did have this topic come up. You probably saw it, Nancy, in public forums this week as a resident disclosed her blood test results, water test results in cancer treatment that she's recently had. And the comments were astonishing, and a whole wave of people that I hadn't heard from in the past and names I was unfamiliar with. And I just went, of course, there's more and more and more. So let's just circle back to Ron and see what he's thinking here, listening to all this so we can wrap this up. Any thoughts on this discussion, Ron?
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I think I do support the drop off. I agree with Nancy, but I think some people are just trying to get water. So I think a drop off would help. I agree it's a secondary solution. We don't want it to be a primary solution, but I think it would help some people here in town that are waiting weeks for water. I mean, I'm still telling people that as soon as they get their water delivery to put a new one in. And that's sad. It's like, as soon as you get the delivery, put another one in. So so I agree with that. And basically everything else you guys have discussed, I would be willing to agree with all of that. I think we need to unify together. I just feel like sometimes everyone tells me Londonderry is a tough place to unify because we got so many Superfund sites. But if we can, you know, get on with anything else you guys are doing, I'd be willing to support that.
Super.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'll pull
Ron,
this.
I have a resident for you in Londonderry who has had some battles with this. I'm going to put you guys together on email if that's okay with Amy. Maybe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, well, I'll pull together, you know, notes and points and highlights of our meetings to do that, report back to the full committee. And the last couple of meetings we had, we did talk more specifically about, you know, the DES website and our support for that, need for resources for communication. So we have some very specific things, and this discussion, I think, was really to say, what else is there? So I have a good sense, unfortunately, no surprise, what's on people's mind. We're all hearing and seeing the same thing. You know, Amy's hearing it. And this, you know, we have to incorporate the needs of the citizens and the families in, you know, in our report. I think I really feel compelled to kind of put that in there so that voice is heard. I will contact St. Gobain and see if they want to have this meeting with town, you know, managers, town councilor, and or selectmen and citizen advocates, so we can talk about this water issue directly with them and the issues that the vendors can join also, right? So, and in the state. So I will reach out to them. They haven't heard from me in a bit, but I'll reach out to them and say, hey, you know, let's try to set this meeting up and see what we can do. But I think in that meeting, we'll make it clear that the drop-off is the secondary solution, not the primary. I may not tell them that. Well, of course, I've just said it publicly in a recorded meeting, but we'll see. I think we have to do something together and collectively, and the benefit of this group meeting is, you know, putting our voices together instead of all, you know, fighting the same battles and putting out the fires in our little corners of the world, right? So I think that's it for today. And you have something you're thinking.
Yeah, do you mind if I just maybe quickly go through the rebate program, give a little update, and maybe address some of Ron's comments real quick? No, I won't take too long, I promise. So I am actually going to share my screen so you can take a look at the website. Let me get you guys back on camera. There we go. So Ron, you are right. What you are hearing from people is the same thing we are hearing in here. So our major issues are the vendor code, which is unfortunately a necessary evil because that is the mechanism we use to pay people here at the state. So we do need that vendor code. What we're hearing about it is that clearly it's a vendor code, right? It's designed for businesses, and clearly most of these people are not businesses, they're individuals. The code is still needed. On the website here, if you scroll down to the bottom, we have a utilizing the online vendor registration. This is a guide that steps through the online form and tells them how to fill it out. And also mid-page is the webinar recording from the webinar we did on, what was it, August 3rd. And so in that webinar, I walked through the online registration and how to fill it out. I do have paper copies here that I've mailed out to people if they are not comfortable with the online registration process. But yes, that is a main sticking point with a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of people about it. The second thing is the post-treatment sample that we are requiring. And the reason we're requiring it is because we want to ensure that the treatment that was installed is operating properly and people are protected. The other thing that it's going to tell us is people that have already installed treatment, say 1 or 2 years ago, may have never done a post-treatment sample, and it will kind of give them an idea of where their treatment is at 2 years later and how it's performing. And it will give us an idea of how those systems are being maintained by homeowners after installation. So it has a dual purpose for us, and we are requiring it. The main thing to know, what I'm telling people is reach out to whoever installed your treatment, because more than likely they will come back out and take that sample. The DES is not providing that service at this time, and that's mainly because we are still trying to use our resources to sample people for the first time. And so we really want to focus on that so we can get others that may be exposed and don't know it, getting treatment as well. So reach out to their vendor that installed the treatment first. If that doesn't work, on the website down below here in additional resources is a list of laboratories that they could use to help them get that sample. And an important thing to know is the cost of that sample is covered by the rebate. So we are not expecting anybody to do this and not reimburse them for it. So those are some main points with those two things. Ron, another thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Amy. I just had a couple quick questions when you're.
No, go ahead. You can go. So we don't.
It's not related to the rebate program. But question is, I have heard from folks who put in their own POET system, or and within the timeline, who are in the consent decree, and Saint-Gobain is obligated. And so some people did the sample out of pocket. Gobain is obligated to reimburse for that pre and post sample, correct?
That is a conversation that they have to have with Saint-Gobain. If they need some resources or more information, they can speak with Andrew Fuller.
Okay.
So, but yeah,
Okay.
that is a conversation they're going to have directly. And my understanding is that the Saint-Gobain is going to be having these conversations with a lot of these people, because
Okay.
if their solution is a POET and they've already installed one, Saint-Gobain is going to go in and do an assessment of what they installed,
Yep.
whether it's appropriate, if they need to upgrade it. And so that's when those conversations about reimbursement really need to happen. So
Is your sense that they have done this? Have you seen cases where they have reimbursed, or is it really individualized?
Not that I'm aware of, but Jeff Martz or Andrew Fuller might know better than I, because they're the project managers on this for DES, and so they're a little closer to it than I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
My other question was, and I can defer to them.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second?
Oh, I'm sorry, Lauren.
Nancy, can I ask you just to take over and close out the meeting? Because I have an 11:15 appointment and I have to run. Okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Lorraine. The only other question was, if somebody puts in their own point of entry treatment system and they are on the consent decree, obviously they identified that as their short-term solution. But, in theory, if they didn't want reimbursement for that POET from Gobain, and instead, we're eligible for say a water hookup, right? Or a water line, because they've already done that POET, do they relinquish that right to access a water hookup if they're not asking for reimbursement for the POET?
No, so if Saint-Gobain has in those tables designated them for a water line connection, the fact that they have treatment will not disturb that agreement. They will
Okay,
still be they will still be eligible for the water main extension. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So those were the two main points I had. And then there's two other things that I just wanted to put out there. We are encouraging people, if you can tell them, to email this address right here, this PFAS rebate program. Because with that, there's 4 people here monitoring that email box. And so we can have a quicker response to them than if they're all just coming into one person's phone. So I'm encouraging, and I've had that on my voicemail as well, when people call in to email that so that we can respond to them quicker. Because otherwise I'm trying to stay on top of mine and answer them the day I get them, but it has lapsed recently to like a day or two to get back to them, and I'm not happy with that response. So the email address will really help with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing I've heard, and I just want to put it out there, is that some people are installing whole house reverse osmosis treatment. That is not recommended based on the amount of water that a reverse osmosis system wastes just to treat. So like those point of use ones under your kitchen sink, for every gallon you treat, wastes 3 gallons of water. So you put this in a whole house scale and you're treating for your laundry and your toilets. The amount of water that's being wasted, especially in a time of drought, it is not recommended that a whole house reverse osmosis system be installed. So I just wanted to put that out there. So maybe you could help spread that message. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely, we'll do that.
Thanks, Amy.
perfect. Yeah, so
Can I
that's
ask-
all I really had, unless you guys have any questions about the rebate
Amy, would
program.
it be possible to request a copy of the recording of this meeting?
Of this meeting, I
Yeah.
always supply it to Lorraine, but I can send it
Oh, you
out
do?
to all of you
Okay.
if you would like me to. Yeah.
I think it could be really helpful just from a time and question standpoint to make it accessible to to the public, because I think we covered a lot.
I believe these meetings are always posted to the public if I'm not.
Right, but
Yeah.
it's people
Yeah.
don't typically seek it out, versus posting it or
Well, I will tell you, as part of the new and improved DES PFAS website, we are going to have a page for this commission. And so all of the meetings will be put up on our calendar. And then after the fact, any documents that were disclosed during the meeting, the recording of the meeting is all going to be put up on the DES's website. So we're hoping by doing that, it will make it more accessible to the public, and they can go to the PFAS webpage and find hopefully just about everything they need. So
awesome.
that's one of our goals.
Great.
I just want to thank Amy for that new PFAS website. That's been one of the problems that we've had trying to get things up on the State House Commission website. And as you said, Amy, if people have that one-stop place to go to, we refer them back, then so much more of the information is available there. And I thank you, because it really, that's huge. And we've been without this for almost 2 years. So it's much appreciated. And as always, as I say, I'm so grateful that you're there. So thank you, Amy, for everything, and always being available to help us out with these calls and being such a tremendous resource for all of us. I had one last question, and that's, do you know or have an idea in terms of the funding for the Merrimack rebate program? Any idea when potential approval for that is? That I think it was $1.1 million, I think is what we requested for the Merrimack rebate program. Any idea when it goes to executive, governor and council, right? Is that?
Yeah. Yes. So I have to write the grant agreement for that. And then once I do that and we get it all back inside, we'll go to governor and council. So that is on my agenda to work on next week. Like
Okay.
later today and next week. So I've unfortunately been delayed with the rebate program.
Yeah.
So, but now that we kind of have that in a good place, I can refocus my attentions.
Thank you.
RLF.
And have any other towns been already approved for that?
The only other town would be Bedford.
Okay. And have they already
Yes.
got approval?
They have not gone to governor
Same thing.
and
So,
executive
okay.
council. They're in the same spot as
Spot.
Merrimack
Yeah,
right now.
I just wondered. Great. Thank you. Well, I guess we've certainly had a full meeting today, and thanks for being such a great resource for so many of our questions. And I think maybe we'll have to reach out regarding by email as to when we'll have the next meeting. I know Laureen's not here, and I don't want to commit to anything that she wouldn't be available for. So I think at this point we will end our meeting, and hopefully see everybody at least next month. So.
Thank
Grant,
you.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Mike. Thanks, Ron.
a
Thank
good
you,
day.
Thank you, everybody.
Good
Thank you,
weekend.
the public, anybody that's listening in. Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys.